Like with ebooks, the more you write, the more you build up your audience, the more you can sell. It's the same with audio, right? If you put one audiobook out there, for most people, they're not going to immediately make a return on that audiobook. Also, this is very general. If this isn't true for you, it doesn't mean you won't make money in audio. But if you are in a position where you can pay for the production of your audiobook with the first month's sales of your ebook sales, it is a good bet that audio is going to be a good long-term financial investment for you.
Welcome to the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. There has never been a better time for writers. More information, options, and opportunities are available to you, but navigating these requires insight. Join Mark Leslie Lefebvre as he draws upon more than a quarter century of experience as a writer, a bookseller, and a trusted book industry consultant to explore and reflect on the writing and publishing landscape to help you make informed choices on your writer journey.
Hello, Reflectives, and welcome to episode 159 of the Stark Reflections on Writing and Publishing podcast. This is your host, Mark Leslie Lefebvre. In this episode, I have an interview with Sarah Beth Goer. Sarah Beth Goer is an actor, producer, audiobook narrator, singer, creative talent of many hats. She is also a member of acting union SAG-AFTRA and AEA. Her feature film, Three Roads, which she co-wrote, starred in, and produced, won Best Writers at the LA Femme International Film Festival in 2019. Sarah is also an audiobook narrator, which is how I met her, with over 100 titles under her belt. Notable works include Harper title, The Unteachables, named in January 2019 an Apple Books Must Listen, Disney Hyperion title, The Devouring Guy, which placed on Barnes & Noble's 20 most anticipated YA debuts of 2019, and Night Music, which Audiophile magazine called an exquisite listen, deeming Goer's performance dynamic and noteworthy as she successfully captured the raw emotions of first love, muddled by racism and greed. Now, Sarah is awesome. I had such a wonderful conversation with her, and that was shortly after we met, as I am hiring her to do several stories in the Obsessions anthology that I've been working on, but we'll get to that interview later on in the podcast. First, I'm going to share comments from recent episodes. This comment comes in from Victoria Tate via Twitter, and Victoria says, I had a fantastic one-on-one session with Jeff yesterday after hearing him on Mark Leslie's podcast, episode 157, a conversation with Jeff Elkins, the dialogue doctor. That is wonderful. Thank you so much, Victoria. I'm so glad that you had a chance to do a one-on-one with Jeff and actually learn from him firsthand. I'm looking forward to doing one of those myself, actually in discussions with Jeff on a pretty interesting collaborative project with him, which is, of course, going to allow me to tap into his wonderful expertise. And I'm so glad that you enjoyed that episode, and I'm so glad that you enjoyed learning from Jeff. Now, if you have comments for any episode of the podcast, you can leave them on the episode over at starkreflections.ca. You can also at me on Twitter. I am at Mark Leslie. And now a word from this episode's sponsor, Findaway Voices. Findaway Voices is a tool that indie authors and small publishers can use to get their books distributed to the world's largest selection of retailers and libraries, with 43 and counting places to get your books into. Now, you can use Findaway Voices to find professional voice actors like Sarah Beth Goer, the guest on this episode. They will project manage that for you, where you put in your RFP, and they actually have humans. It's not the system of algorithms, etc., and it's not open to just anyone. They have a list of professional narrators that they use, and they actually assign an internal audiobook professional who will project manage and select either up to 5 to 10 voices that they think would be suitable. Then you listen to them and you work with your project manager to pick them. Then you get to work with a great professional narrator, perhaps even someone like Sarah Beth Goer. Or if you hired an awesome narrator like Sarah Beth Goer, the guest from this episode, and maybe she produced it for you, or maybe she was the voice talent that created it for you. If you own the rights to the audio, you can upload that file to Findaway Voices and use them for distribution. So you can use them in multi-talented. You can use them in multiple different ways. And again, I'm going to leave that voice, that stumble there, because I am not a professional voice talent. Therefore, you're getting less than professional. Although you're getting a relatively decent podcast, I think. Anyways, that's an aside. Back on track. Whether you produce the audio yourself or whether you're looking for a professional narrator, Findaway Voices has you covered. There's flexibility in how you get your book out into the market, flexibility in where your book goes. You can use Findaway Voices for all of the places, which comes with extra bonuses and features, such as they do a plagiarism check, a pirating check, because if they're the single place that's sending it out, and they find it somewhere that it's not supposed to be, they immediately know that it couldn't have gotten there any other way, and they send down the takedown notice for you. So that's if you go all in with them, or you can select. You can pick and choose and say, well, I'm direct here and I'm direct there, and you can use Findaway Voices. Again, flexibility for you as an indie author, because what Findaway does is they find a way to give you back your voice as an indie author. And if you want to check out how you can use Findaway Voices and leverage some of the great tools that they have and options that they have available for you, you can check them out over at starkreflections.ca/Findaway. And now on to a personal update. Okay, I'm keeping the personal update really short this week, although I say that and I don't always stick to it. Oh well, you know me. I launched Strange Sudbury Stories earlier this week on Tuesday, October 20th. It's a collaborative anthology project with Sean Costello and Scott Overton. Now, 2 stories from each of us for a short collection of short stories, ideal for Halloween reading. And just a note for you folks out there is the importance of putting together a press release. So I put together a press release, focusing on Sudbury and focusing on all 3 authors from Sudbury. And I shared that and I sent it off to a bunch of media, and I've already had a few places pick up on it. And one of them published a full article. I even heard from a bookstore manager from Sudbury who said, I've already gotten phone calls. When can we get the print book? And there have been issues with print on demand and delays and all kinds of nightmares, but there's a company in Montreal I was able to find and work with who are going to be able to drop ship books directly to the bookstore from me, from Stark Publishing, and they'll have them next Tuesday, which is absolutely phenomenal. So that was kind of cool. Other thing about press releases, I noticed over the weekend people were starting to buy my virtual audio walking tour via VoiceMap, and I had an interview with somebody from VoiceMap on this podcast way back when. I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. And what I have is a guided half-hour tour of haunted downtown Hamilton based on the research I did for Haunted Hamilton. So note for you authors, I licensed the rights to the book Haunted Hamilton to Dundurn Publishing, Canada's largest independent publisher, and that's great, but I don't have any other rights because they pretty much are sitting on all of them. But I do still have the research and the notes I took to write the chapters, so I derived the audio content from the research, from the notes. And even there's additional things that aren't in the book that are there. But obviously, it's a lead-in. People can buy it for $4.99, and they can do the half-hour walking tour where I guide them around downtown Hamilton. And maybe when they finish it, they'll go and buy the book, which is kind of cool. So it kind of helps push people to the book, or maybe people who've read the book and they want to get this. So again, it's just exercising your IP in different creative ways. But importantly, I created a press release since I was in the process of doing one for the Sudbury Tales, and I'd started to sell over the weekend. I noticed, I'm like, I'm starting to sell the virtual tours. Oh yeah, it's getting close to Halloween. People want to go on a ghost walk, but they can't because of COVID, because you can't go in groups. It has to be less than 10 people. And so I thought, well, there's a hook there, obviously, that this is a physically distancing, safe exercise, you can go by yourself at a time of your choice and do a guided tour. So I crafted up some press releases. I think I sent it off to 5 or 6 Hamilton, Ontario media. I heard the next day back from a reporter from CHML, local radio station, who did a 5-6 minute interview with me for air. Haven't heard back from the other places, but again, the impact, the power of just creating a very specifically niche targeted press release, and how the angle, the hook for the story. Obviously, I used the COVID and the pandemic angle on one, and I used the Sudbury, the local authors angle, on the other. And so again, when you're thinking about those niche markets, it's really, really important. So a little bit of a reflection there. The reason I said this was going to be short, and it's apparently not short, is that Liz turns 50 on this Thursday. So normally Thursday is the day I'm doing all the production and getting everything ready, but we're going to be busy as part of celebrating her birthday over the course of Thursday, Friday, and Saturday this weekend. And we'll be doing that with her girls and my son, and I've got some fun surprises in the works. I'm not going to mention them now, but I'll likely share what those surprises are in next week's personal update, which I'm really, really excited about. So that's why this is kind of being recorded a little bit early. I should also mention, I also published another book, and I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but it was to Macabre for Montreal. So Shana Krishnasamy and I, who co-wrote the book Macabre Montreal, have released To Macabre for Montreal, which is basically a bunch of stories that were cut from the original book because they were too dark, too disturbing. They're mostly kind of true crime-ish serial killers, including one of Canada's most notorious child molesters and serial killers, and they were very disturbing. So we put them together into a really short book. It's less than 20,000 words. And we release that for those who are looking for those disturbing things. Again, potentially it's a hook into the larger book, Macabre Montreal, and we'll see what happens. I mean, we just wanted to get the work out there and sort of experiment with that. Again, experimenting with different things you can do with your IP. So other news is, okay, so I am doing stuff all weekend, personal family stuff. I actually have 3 short stories to finish by the end of the month. So 2 I've started, and 1 I have not even begun. And actually, one's actually due on Sunday, October 25th at midnight. So I have till the end of the day, so I'll probably be working till 11 o'clock on that. It's this one's specifically for a horror writing workshop I'm taking with Dean Wesley Smith, and it just ended. I did the 3 weeks, and now it's time to write the story. And ironically, it was one of Dean's comments on one of my previous assignments that kind of sparked the story. And I said, I have never written a horror story about skeletons, really. And so that's what started it off. And ironically, the story is based a little bit on, I'm going to include something about skeletons and skulls, but I also incorporated really fascinating details from the latest episode of the Best Book Ever podcast that my good friend Julie Strauss runs. And if you're a book nerd, you've got to listen to it. It's just, I love that. It's one of my favorite new podcasts. And it's not about the craft of writing, except for the fact that when you talk about great books, you really understand what resonates with readers. And maybe that is, maybe I do like it because it helps me as a writer, but I just love it because Julie's a fantastic interview. Her passion for books is phenomenal. And it doesn't matter if it's a book I was interested in or not. Every single week she has an amazing guest on, and they get me excited about books. And Nathan Van Coops, who is a phenomenal guy, he has a dog named Atticus. We have a cat named Atticus. Nathan and I bond every year at Novelist Inc. in St. Pete's, Florida. So I missed seeing him this year, but it was great to hear him on Julie's podcast talking about The Never-Ending Story, the novel, and why that is the best book ever. But I actually incorporate some of what he shared about how he got the book in my little horror story, which is kind of cool. It's interesting how these things come together and just become part of the worlds that you create. So I've got a lot of writing to do that I'm going to jam into the end of the month, but that's how I like it, because I've got 2 books to work on for November. I definitely have to hit a minimum of 50,000, if not way beyond that, which for me is I know there are writers who can crank that out in 3 days, but for me that's it's a challenge, and so I'm looking forward to that challenge. I figure if I can do these 3 short stories by the end of the month, I can write 2 books in November, right? In any case, that's it for my really short 10-minute personal introduction. Why don't we get on to this interview with Sarah Beth Goer. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today.
My great pleasure. I told you that it was a secret dream of mine to get to be a podcast guest someday. So thank you for making the dream come true.
With all the audio you've done, the professional audio that you do, I can't believe that you haven't yet been a podcast guest. So I am honored that I get to be the first one to have. So I got to get this episode aired quickly before someone else bags the glory.
Aw.
You were introduced to me by a fellow writer, romance writer, Erin Wright. And so you've worked on Erin's audiobooks, is that right?
Yes, I have had the great pleasure of being her narrator of choice, and we're working on getting all her romance novels into audio right now. And
Cool.
we've done a good I think like 5 or 6 of them so far.
Wow. And you've done other audiobooks as well. When did you, I want to go back, when did you get started in audiobook narration?
I began in 2015.
Okay.
That's the short answer. Do you want like the little bit of background?
I want to get a little bit of the little less abridged version.
Okay, so I was already a really dedicated, serious actress. And then I heard about audiobooks, and I heard about this site acx.com, which for any listeners who don't know, ACX is a site that Amazon created so that indie authors and indie narrators could meet each other and make audiobooks happen. And I learned that anyone could go onto ACX and say, hey, I'm a narrator, and start auditioning. And that was really exciting for me because I was living in LA at the time. And the thing about working on becoming an actor in LA, or being an actor in LA and trying to get jobs, is that it's hard to even get to the point where you get to audition, let alone get to the point where you get to audition regularly and now you're hoping you get a job. And
Right.
so I was having a trouble even getting auditions. And so the idea of like, oh, nobody can bar me from auditioning just felt great. And so I jumped on there, and I got my first couple jobs, and it was so wonderful. And then I quickly realized, like, okay, I'm not going to be able to make a full-time career just from the books that are on ACX. So what am I going to do to continue to build this business? And so I decided, hey, you know what I'll do? I'll contact authors on Amazon who haven't made their audio yet, and I'll pitch myself to them. So I tried that a few times and, got some feedback, and it hadn't taken yet. And I said, okay, I am going to do this 200 times before I'm allowed to decide that it's not working, right?
200 times.
200 times. That was my commitment to myself, because I had
Wow.
once met a salesperson. I was an administrative assistant while I was going to acting school, and a salesperson came and knocked on the door, and I was just chatting with him, and I said, like, gosh, doesn't your job get like frustrating? You keep knocking on doors and everybody tells you no. And he's like, no, not at all. Because the thing is, I've been doing this for long enough that I realized that eventually I get a yes. So I'm all good. So I kept that in the back of my mind, and I said, okay, like I can't determine whether this method is working unless I have enough data. And so I am committed to doing this 200 times before I'm allowed to say, oh, it didn't work.
Wow.
And what
That
happened
is
is
so unlike the indie author community, who you'd be kind of like, if I don't have it now, I give up.
well, I actually disagree. I think there are many indie authors that do that, and many artists who do that. But I think that there are a lot of indie authors who are having very successful careers because they did the opposite. Like I love listening to indie author podcasts, and I have friends who make their livings as indie authors. And I think that's part of the success formula for a lot of them is like, okay, I am going to do this. Now it's a matter of figuring out how I make it take off. And that takes diligence and it takes patience.
Right. Sometimes you have to wait 200 months before, or it doesn't always happen overnight, right? It takes that diligence, that dedication, that effort.
Yes, but to be clear, not 200. I didn't commit to 200 months. I committed to reaching out to 200 authors. So that
No,
took
I
a
know.
lot
I'm just
shorter time
different.
than.
Yeah, different, or 200 days as
Yeah,
opposed
yeah.
to 200 minutes or something like that.
However long that you
Yeah.
need for it to.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So you decided this. You decided you were going to commit. To that, and
Exactly. And then, so it only worked 3 times. However, one of those 3 people said, hey, I'm a part of this author community. There are no narrators who are a part of it yet. You might want to come check us out, get to meet people. And so I went into that community. and just started being helpful. Like rather than pitching myself and being like, hire me, I just, quietly was like, I'm a narrator, but I'm here to help you. And I just offered advice and met people that way. And ultimately, that is what led to my full-time career.
Wow. I love that. I love that. So, working with authors, then, what's the kind of what are the things that you know that authors have requested that could be helpful to listeners of this podcast? Like, what do I need to know if I'm looking at working with a professional narrator?
So the first thing that comes to mind is, what is your goal in turning your books into audio? Because some people, their goal is like, I just want my books to be in audio because I love my story and it would be such an honor to have my story out loud. And so this is a passion project for me.
Right.
In which case, okay, great. Then you are looking for the narrator that you feel in your heart really brings your words to life in the way that you dream of, right?
Okay.
Versus other authors, I imagine they're like, look, I'm trying to make a return on investment. And it'd be great if I have the narrator of my dreams. But what's even more important is I'm paying the price point that I feel comfortable with. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
And if you were in that camp, then what I would want you to know and think about is to have done the research to know if your books are likely to make you money if you pay for production for audio, if you're likely to make a return. So, how would you know that? Talking to fellow authors who are in your genre who have done audio about what their experience is like. Also, some good, like, general rules of thumb. Obviously, everybody's business is different, but just kind of like general, broad, usually these things are true. Audio tends to be a more long-term investment. Just like with ebooks, the more you write, the more you build up your audience, the more you can sell. It's the same with audio, right? If you put one audiobook out there, for most people, they're not going to like immediately make a return on that audiobook. Also, bundles are a big factor. Like if you're writing in a series and you can put your series into an audio bundle, you're going to be more likely to make your money back, because even if you are publishing your audio wide, Audible is still going to be a major player in your audio sales. And Audible listeners love bundles because they can spend one credit and get, multiple books instead of just one book for their one credit. Also, like this is very general. If this isn't true for you, it doesn't mean you won't make money in audio. But if you are in a position where you can pay for the production of your audiobook with the first month's sales of your ebook sales, it is a good bet that audio is going to be a good long-term financial investment for
Oh,
you.
I love that. I've never heard that advice before. So, based on your first month ebook sales, you have enough money to pay for a professional narrator. That's a really good indicator that there's a big enough audience, I guess, that probably exists in audio.
Exactly right. And again, it's a rule of thumb.
Wow.
It's just a rule of thumb, but like typically if your ebook sales from your very first month would pay for your audio production, you're probably going to long-term make more money on your audio than if you didn't make your audio.
Oh, wow.
Now,
Cool.
most of that was all tips for if you're going to pay for your production up front. I don't want to
Yeah.
we're not doing a podcast just about audio details right now. So like there's also royalty share. There's also, you can sell your audio rights to a publisher. And I have some very specific thoughts on that I would love to share.
Well, I would love to hear them.
Okay, so this is what I really want every author to know.
Okay.
Um,
You guys
so,
listening?
so you can sell your rights to an audio publisher, and typically how that will work is they will pay you in advance, and they will give you a percent of royalties, and they will pay for production for your audio to happen. Now, that is an amazing deal for someone who doesn't want to take the financial risk themselves on audio. Like
Right.
if you are in a situation where you're like, I don't know if I'm going to make the money, I don't want to take the financial risk, and that offer's on the table, I highly encourage you to take it. However, this is what I want every author to know. Some authors, they take that deal because they think to themselves, like, I know I would make more money if I managed my audio myself, but I'm too busy writing. So I'm just going to sell my rights. It's just the easiest way to do it. If that's you, if you're in that position where you know you're going to make more money, but you just don't want to deal with the management, I want you to know that there is a third option that is called hiring a producer. So there are people who their sole job is you pay them and they make your audio happen for you. And they are a one-time fee rather than taking a percentage of your royalties. So I want you to know that producers exist. And if you are in a situation where you just don't have the time to manage your audio, but you know you'll make more if you keep your rights than if you sell your rights, please, please, please hire a producer. That will be the best financial move for you.
Because they kind of project manage everything, and then maybe there's feedback that's required or whatever, but it's not that heavy work all the way through.
Exactly right. And you can find a producer, like they'll work to your preference, right? Like if you're like, I do not want to handle this at all. Like, here's my book, go make it happen. I don't care. Hire the narrators. I don't want to hear them. Great. The producer can do that for you. But if you're like, listen, I want you to go do all the like heavy lifting and the troubleshooting, but I want to approve my narrators. They can do that for you, right? So you can have the involvement that you want and the time input that you want by hiring a producer.
Thank you. That is awesome. I'm glad you shared that. So how does somebody find out, like, how do I find a producer?
Well, that's a tricky question, right? Because it's not like super obvious. You could try searching audio producer online and see what you turn up, because some of these producers have websites. But just like real quick, I'll give you 4 options. I produce audiobooks.
Okay.
3 companies that I can name that I know these people and they're good people and they do their jobs well. Blunder Woman Productions, Pink Flamingo Productions, and Lyric Audio. All of these people are producers who are experienced in working with indie authors.
Cool. And I'll make sure to have links to those places in the show notes at starkreflections.ca. Thank you for
Awesome.
that. Awesome. That'll be awesome. So you talked earlier about being an actor, being in LA, and I can imagine that knowing that you had to knock on 200 doors was probably some of the effect of working in LA as an actor or trying to work in LA as an actor, which is very competitive. Can I go back? Like, how was acting? When did you get involved? Like, how did you get the bug to be an actor and then voice talent and all the things that are combined? I want to go back even further to learn that story.
Sure thing. So when I was growing up, my mother and sister did community theater. And when I was a little girl, I was just watching them on stage, like dying to be on stage with them. And so when I was 7, I got to do my first play. And then throughout
7? Wow.
I auditioned for my very first musical.
What was it? What was it?
Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Oh my goodness.
And I got to be one of the like little kids who follows the narrator around. Um, and then I kept doing community theater and high school theater. And when it came time to go to college, I thought to myself, okay, making a career as an actor, that is crazy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do something entirely different while I'm in college. And if after college I'm still convinced I have to be an actor, I will go to grad school. That was my plan.
Okay.
And that's more or less what I did, except that during college, I couldn't stay away from performing. So I ended up designing my own performing major. And then after college, I didn't go to grad school. I went to a very serious conservatory. And so when I got, like, for me, the conservatory is when, like, all along it was fun and I liked it. But when I got to the conservatory, that's when I realized, like, oh my gosh, like, I need to do this for my soul. Like, acting is actually spiritual for me.
Right.
And after the conservatory was done, I wanted to make my living as an actor. I was really drawn to film and TV. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to LA. And I went to LA for 5 years. And the main thing that I learned there, and this is gonna sound like much more easeful and zen than it actually was. It was actually like extremely painful and I had to bang my head against a wall a bajillion times. But the main thing I learned was, hey, there are certain doors that are open for me and they're open for a reason. And there are certain doors that are closed for me and they're closed for a reason. And if I trust and I walk through the doors that are open, my life is going to get happier and better every single day. And so I'm still practicing that. And there's a lot of things that are easier to see in retrospect than they were to see in the moment at that time. Like when I first began audiobooks, it was out of desperation and frustration. Like, F this, I'm ready to make money as an actor. I don't care what effing medium. I had barely even listened to audiobooks at that point. And I went in with the attitude, like, I'm going to make money now. And I did. And so at the time, in that moment, I maybe felt like a failure, like, oh no, I didn't make it in film and TV. But in retrospect, I can see how audiobooks are an incredible gift. Like, first of all, I have since fallen in love with audiobooks. I'm always listening to them. I think they are just an amazing medium, and they are really an actor's medium, because the actor is the entire, like, it's a one person show.
Right.
Um and uh and I'm not limited by how I look, right? Like, there are certain ways I'm going to be cast because of how I look, unless I'm creating my own projects, but I'm not limited by that in audio. And I play, every character under the sun, because the narrator is narrating all the character. Like, it's incredibly rewarding medium. But it's also what I needed for myself, like, spiritually, because I was really like, the artists that I'm the most drawn to, they really reveal their souls through their work, right? Like, they courageously let, like, their true selves shine through really authentically. And I longed to do that, but I was so crippled by my own, like, self-consciousness and, not feeling worthy, that I wasn't able to get through that block and really share myself in the way I hoped to be able to do. And sitting alone by myself in a booth to do the audiobook work has helped me be able to access and share who I am through my acting in a way that I just wasn't figuring out when I was trying to do film and theater, right? And then also, it's what, like, now I have a thriving business and I make my living as an artist. So there were all these gifts to it that I just never could have imagined, when at the time I just was like, whatever, I mean, this door is open, fine, I'll walk through that one, you know?
Wow. I want to go back to thinking about your theater days, and the theater term, a one-hander, where you were on stage yourself doing the whole show.
Yeah.
Um, did you find yourself in a have you had you done those kinds of theater, or was it always interactive theater with other people?
No, I've never done a one-hander play, and that is something I miss in audiobook narration, like, the amazingness of getting to work with other actors.
Right.
I have done really small plays, like intimate plays where there's only a few cast members in a very small, like black
Right.
box theater, and I love that.
Because
Um,
I was just looking at the parallel between that and the potential, because it's your voice and that's it, and that's the whole book, but you're also playing all these roles.
yeah,
Um,
it is very parallel. Like, that's the best comparison I can come up with, is a one-person show to a and, there are also other types of audiobooks. There are full cast audiobooks.
right.
So it's not always one person, but typically that's the most common.
Have you done any collaborative audio, or has it always been Sarah?
I've gotten to do some multicast productions where we all had our own chapters. So we were all each still alone in our booths doing our thing, but there was
Right.
some coordination. And when the book comes together, there are multiple voices, but we all had our own experience alone in the booth because we all had our own chapters. I
Right.
have not yet gotten to do. There's also a cool thing. Like, there are multicast audiobook narrations where the actors are actually in the room with each other, and,
Right.
like, that's often called duet style narration, where you've got, like, one, the female speaking the female, like in a romance, the female speaking the female lines and the male speaking the male lines. Those are more expensive and more complicated to put together, and I haven't gotten to do those yet. I do have a recommendation, just if anyone wants to hear a production that's like that. I
Yeah.
cannot recommend more highly Charlotte's Web. It came out relatively recently. Meryl Streep is the narrator, and then the producer just brought together the most amazing effing cast to play all the characters. Like,
Wow.
all the best narrators in the industry are playing, Wilbur and Charlotte. And so, if you want to hear a really good multicast production, that's one I recommend.
Wow. I was thinking of one of the more recent Michael Connolly novels that I listened to. So Titus Welliver, who plays Bosch on the Amazon TV
Mm,
series, he's been doing the Bosch books for years now, ever since he took over that role. And I can't remember who plays Renee, who's a new character in the universe.
mm.
And the scenes that were Harry Bosch's point of view were done by Titus, and Renee's scenes were done by this other actor who I can't remember her name, unfortunately. But what I loved about it is when it was a Bosch scene narrated by the male,
Mhm.
every time the female was in it and it was her speaking, it was actually the female actor's voice.
Ah,
And
yes. So that's a duet narration.
and
Exactly.
it was so subtle because each point of view scene was done that way. And I thought, oh my God, the producer, like to connect that must have been a lot of work, because
It's
it's not, I mean, it's not all dialogue, right?
yes, ideally you get the two narrators in the booth together so
Right.
they're actually working off of each other. That is the best way to do a duet production, and I'm imagining
Wow.
that's probably what they did for that, but I don't
Wow.
know for sure.
Yeah, it kind of caught me by surprise the first time that they met each other, and all of a sudden it switched voice just for their dialogue, and everything else was really, really well done. And again,
Cool.
not as heavy probably as Charlotte's Web, which has multiple actors.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a whole ensemble cast.
Wow. So I want to talk about quickly, because it looks like you're in a sound proof area, like a sound booth, or what is it?
I am. This is my very professional converted closet. Like, we
Okay.
tore it on the walls and we put in soundproofing and then we put in sound dampening inside, and this is where I work.
So how big is the space that you're in right now?
Oh, I'm not super good at estimating dimensions, but I don't know, like 5 feet by 4 feet or something.
Oh, okay. Wow. So it is really a closed sound environment. Cool. That's where you
Yes,
produce when you're recording. That's where you're doing them.
indeed. Although I normally have the door closed, which I didn't bother with right now because it gets
Yeah.
very hot in here.
Well, yeah,
And I
and
didn't
again, it's podcast, so it's not like ACX or any of the other, or Audible or any of the places that are
exactly.
going
I
to
was
go.
like,
Wait
okay,
a
the
second,
the audio doesn't need to be perfect. I
the
can
room
keep the
noise.
door open and be
Yeah.
cooler.
Yeah, exactly. I even when I'm doing more professional stuff, I have a additional sound uh, sheets that I hang in the room to just
Yeah.
prevent that extra audio bounce.
Yeah, because you narrated one of your own audiobooks, yes?
Yeah, I've done one. It's a lot of work, but I've done one, and I've done a few short stories. But again, when I do those, I really change. I mean, I have a heavily padded room with books and skulls and stuff, but I do need that extra sheet that hangs in it, and I actually have to be configured in a way that it actually creates a room probably the same size as yours,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
pretty much there's very little echo.
Like echo, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably not as good as the space you're in, but it kind of cuts the, yeah. So, and that is the way I met you. I have to let listeners know is I met you when Erin Wright from Wide for the Win introduced us, and I happened to be looking for multiple talents for the Obsessions anthology, and I'm so ecstatic because I went and listened to your samples on your website, and like, yes. Oh, and I was going through the stories, and I think part of the joy is, oh, I think she'd be perfect for this one, and I think she'd be perfect for that one. So I'm thrilled that I get to have your talent in that anthology. So that's really, really exciting.
Well, I'm extremely excited and extremely honored, and I also think it's cool, like, you clearly have a casting director's soul or a producer's soul that you really like, "Ooh, this would fit for this, and that would fit for that."
Yeah,
It's neat.
that's part of the thrill of putting together an anthology, is bringing all these voices together. Like normally the voices are just words on a page, but now I did that, and now I get to do the other one where it's like now I get to match voice talent too. So
Yeah.
that's a really fun process. So that was sort of a recommendation, I guess, is how I found you. Is that how you find a lot of work? Is from authors you've worked with or other voice talent you've worked with?
Often. So, mainly I'm a part of this, author community that I mentioned. It's a forum. I'm not mentioning their name just because 'cause they're, like, closed right now.
Right.
Um, so I still show up there, and I still give advice there, and I still meet people there. So that's one primary source. Another is, like, at this point, I have some authors who are steady clients, right? Like, they're continuing to write, and every time they have a new book, they ask me to do the audiobook for them.
Right.
And I've also branched out into working for major publishers like
Oh,
Scholastic and Harper. Um, I always like um, I knew that I would like to work with them too, in addition to working with indie authors. But being able to have a thriving career and then come to them and be like, hey, I'm already a full time audiobook narrator. And also I'd like to narrate for you was just a really like a great position to be in. And it means that I can cultivate my career more carefully with them, because I don't need them to give me whatever book because I'm trying to make a living, because I'm
Right,
making a
right.
living. So I'm able to be like, hey, I want to do these kinds of books. So I'm able to approach publishers. I'm at the point in my career right now where I'm wanting to move towards getting to do more and more of the books that I most love. And so that's what I use, like, that's what I'm cultivating with publishers right now. And it's, it's a slower
That's cool.
uh, process.
So I have to ask for any authors who are listening. I'm like, oh, I wonder if I could hire Sarah to do my book. Are there particular genres or styles, or what are you looking for when you're trying to figure out? Okay, I would like to work on this project.
Well, my main thing, so first of all, like, yes, if you're hearing my voice right now and you think, oh my gosh, her voice might be great for my series, please reach out, and we can talk about whether that would be a fit. Regardless of your genre. The one exception is I don't personally do stories that are extremely graphically violent.
Right.
Not that I disrespect those in any way. For me personally, they're not a fit. I have to go through too much in my own mind and body to do them that I just don't want to do. Um, uh, but um, like, I'm open to any genre, any author. The main thing that I love in an indie author is them just being an awesome person and us having a great relationship. Like, I always just feel so proud to get to be a part of my indie authors' businesses, that I get to help them make more money in their business, and we get to have this great relationship and they appreciate what I can do for them. Like, that's the main thing I'm looking for in an indie author. That said, I freaking love YA. Like, YA and new adult are really my thing. I do a ton of romance. Uh, but I've thought often, like, why do I love YA so much? And I think it's because when it's done really, really well, it is both deeply profound and utterly simple at the same time. And I find something just so beautiful in that.
That is cool. I like that. Wow. Very cool. Now I want to migrate back into your role as actor, but also producer, writer, and all of that, because I just this week watched this amazing indie film, Three Roads, and you were one of the lead actors in it. Also, I mean, how many roles did you play in this film?
Uh,
First, let's explain what is Three Roads for listeners, and the roles you played in it.
Three Roads is a feature film. We wanted to make a film that would be funny and touching and really celebrate women's friendships in an authentic way. It was a deeply creatively satisfying project for me, and I acted, produced, and co-wrote.
Wow, wow! It was an amazing film. I really enjoyed it, and I want to find out more. So, what was the genesis of this film? And I mean, obviously, you were working in acting, and this was a project, but it obviously had to be something that you were passionate about, probably for a long time. I'm guessing.
Yes. So one day I was listening to this business coach that I really enjoyed at some webinar of hers or something like that. And she said, hey, if you could do anything and there were no obstacles, what would you do? And in that moment, I just knew, I was like, well, I would produce and star in an indie film. And there was something about, I don't know, the timing, the magic of that day. I just suddenly was like, well, what am I waiting for? And so on the spot, I thought to myself, well, who would I want to work with if I made this film? And I thought of Amanda and Vanessa, who are the other two lead actresses in the film, who did not know each other at the time.
Oh, really? You
And
knew them, but they didn't know each
that's
other.
right.
Okay.
Exactly. I'm extremely proud of that, because one of the things that like, I think works the best in our film and that I'm the most proud of is the chemistry of the three leads. And like, obviously a lot of that is the credit of like their wonderful acting. But also I feel very proud that like my artist's instinct what like worked, right? That I just knew it was these two actors and they didn't even know each other. But when we all three came together, like, magic chemistry happened. I'm really proud of that.
Well, I have to
Um,
interrupt there because when you talk about that chemistry, that is one of the things that resonated with me so beautifully. Is you
Thank you.
captured that lifetime female friendship, regardless of how much time or distance has passed, was just beautifully captured. But I think the most brilliant capturing of that was the scene where they decide to make their macaroni,
Yeah, I
and
know.
they get in the car and they go to the grocery store, and then they leave her brother. He's like, it's what she says, something about her hips, and then slams the door.
Yeah.
Like he has to stay in the parking lot while they go pick up the stuff. And it's those scenes where you don't hear the dialogue, it's music, and it's just those. I'm curious about that because that was such a beautiful sequence. Was
Thank
that, how much of
you.
that was ad-libbed? How did that come together?
It's funny that you asked. So that is one of my favorite scenes too. That scene never gets old for me. Every time I watch it, I've seen it hundreds of times. Every time I watch it, it makes me happy. And the entire scene was like we knew, okay, they're going to go to the grocery store and have antics in the grocery store. That's all we knew.
Yeah.
And so we got in there and improvised, and right, it's a combination of like us three actresses coming up with things and the director suggesting things to us. Um, and happy accidents, like one of the moments in the grocery scene, my character like throws a bag of bread
Oh,
like
when
to
you hit
another
the
character.
guy?
Yeah. So the guy that we hit, like I didn't mean to hit him. I was trying to throw it. He was that's our director. That
Oh,
like our
oh,
director
really?
was playing the guy. Yeah, he was playing an extra in that scene, right? So I actually like launched the bread straight into his shoulder, which I did not intend to do, but it's like one of the it's just a lovely moment. And then it's our improvisational reaction to that, like the way I kind of sneak away with like my hand hiding my face, like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. And it's
I
funny
was
that you
wondering
mentioned.
if that was a real accident. That's
Oh
so
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, it was, but also he was our director, not like a random customer in the store.
Well,
Um,
yeah, of course.
um, and it's funny that like I feel very encouraged that you mentioned that scene spoke to you the most, because I actually am longing to make films that are fully improvisational, like where we are like where the outline, where like we know the entire structure of the film and we know what's going to
Right.
happen scene by scene, but then we let the individual scene unfold organically. I am longing to make films that way, and I actually wanted to make Three Roads that way, but it was our very first film, and our director pointed out, who also when he came on board, he became one of the writers, so us four, the three actresses and he collaborated
Right.
to write the film together. And he pointed out, he's like, look, I really think we should have a screenplay, because the thing is, one, none of us have done this before, and we want to make sure we like make a feature length film and we don't actually accidentally make something way too long or way too short.
Yeah.
Two, a lot of the filmmakers I admired who work improvisationally, like Joe Swanberg is a big indie filmmaker who I admire, and he made a lot of his films very improvisationally. My director pointed out, like, yes, but everything was in his head. He was writing, directing, shooting, and editing when he made those films, and we need to make something where we can actually communicate and be on the same page with each other. And so we ended up opting to go with like we have a screenplay that Kip wrote, our director wrote, um, and with a few scenes in there that were done where we just knew what was going to happen in the scene, we let it unfold more organically, like the grocery store scene.
You reminded me of, I mean, that's how I sometimes you considered a pantser if you don't plot out
Yeah,
everything. And what you do is you get your characters, you know your characters, and you just put them in a room together and let them talk, and they tell you what the story is going to be. It almost feels like, because that's kind of what improv is.
yes,
I know who my character is, and I'm just going to be my character now. That, I mean, I did a lot of stage acting too, so I know that's where that comes from, I think.
exactly right. Yeah, I think I would lean towards a little bit more structure. Like I would, if I'm a pantser and I'm writing a novel, I might literally just do that, right? I know who my characters are. They get in a room, they let me know what's going to happen. With a film, I would want to make a little bit more structure than that and know like overall what's going to happen and scene by scene what's going to happen,
Right.
generally the overall plot, for two reasons. One is like if I'm writing a novel and I create a mess, I can edit the mess. If I'm creating a film and I go shoot a mess, it's going to be very, 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 very expensive to fix that mess.
Yeah, moving words is a lot different than, I mean, maybe AI one day you're like, no, 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 the
Right, sure.
so, yeah. So the one other scene, I mean, there's so many. I could probably talk for 3 hours about the film because I
Oh,
really,
thank
really
you.
enjoyed it. But there's a scene where your character is sitting on the couch with the woman she's still deeply in love with, and they're watching that woman who plays an actress,
Right.
um, and they're watching that short the film that she had
Hmm.
bought on DVD.
Yeah.
And there's the scene from the film. It's so short and hilarious.
Oh,
I
good.
was just curious about, because I mean, she's obviously doing something, probably ex-boyfriend, I'm guessing, because you don't really set it up, but it's obvious what's happening. She's spying on him, and then just the way she lunges when he learns.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think about all these little things. It's like a little thing that's on the TV that you see for a quick second, while the more important scene's happening between the two of them.
Hmm.
I'm curious about that scene. Like, you had to come up with a fake, you had to design a cover for the DVD. You had to do all, like, where did that come from? Was that
Yeah.
on the fly, or how did that come about?
So that particular the scene, like the scene within a scene where we're watching her on TV, that
Yeah,
was all Kip's invention. Like, he designed that scene, and his intention behind it, but his intention behind it was influenced by the character that we had all created. Of the character's name is Jamie, right? And she is a movie star. Um, and the idea was that she is playing a bunch of roles in Hollywood, and like her career's working out for her, but the roles, like, are not the roles of her heart. They're just the roles that are she's getting hired for. And so he
right.
wanted to do something that would be like silly and a bit ridiculous. So it was his he all that what happens in that scene came completely from Kip's head, and then married with Vanessa's performance. Vanessa, who played Jamie, right? Like, I remember we had to do that, like, leap away several times to like really get the exact humorous,
Right.
timing of that down. um yeah, but I like what you're saying about like the little detail. And then, yeah, we had a DVD cover. I as a producer took care of making that happen. My dear friend who is a graphic artist made that for us.
Oh, yeah.
Combined with, and that was me consulting with Kip, because he was the director, about what his vision for the DVD cover would be, and then managing getting that done with my friend, the graphic artist, um, who is credited in the credits as our
Yeah, I
DVD
saw
graphic
that. Yeah,
artist.
I
Yeah.
actually I watched the whole. I mean, I'm
Oh, thank
always
you.
fascinated. Is I watched all of the credits, which I know a lot of people don't do, because I was curious of, like, well, Sarah had to have been involved in multiple layers as writer, producer, and then all of the, and recognizing the other actors being involved in different ways. And so I even saw the credit for the DVD cover, which reminded me, it's such a small thing, but you have to put so much effort into it that nobody sees, right?
Oh, yeah, and, we only had so much time and effort and resources. Like, I marvel at, watch any, like, Hollywood movie or television show and just look in the background, and like every single detail that is on that set, it was somebody's job to think about that detail. And sometimes it's just like
Yeah.
mind-bogglingly incredible. That's something I love about film, is all these different artists coming together to collaborate to make this beautiful thing. When that's one time that struck me the most is when I was watching Coco, the Pixar film Coco. And it was just such an incredible, mind-blowingly beautiful film. And I was thinking, like, wow, like if I had been one of the animators who was like, my job was just to like make the trees in the background that nobody would ever notice specifically, but they helped contribute to the atmosphere, I would be so proud, because wow. And that's something that's so special about film, but also so complicated and so expensive.
Yeah, and that's a really good segue, because so when we first this is our first time chatting together after having met digitally, and I was so excited to talk about the film, because I was fanboying,
Oh,
and
thank
then
you.
you let me watch it for free, because I was looking for a way to buy it or support you in some way. I was like, oh my God, you've got to make this available so I can purchase it, because I want to support you. And then you brought me down to reality. Reality is a lot not as fun, right?
Well, yes. So the trick is, with our particular film, there is not a good way for us to distribute it that wouldn't cost us more money to distribute it than we'd likely ever make back. So, for
Right.
example, in order to distribute the film, we need to one thing we need to do is reopen our California LLC. Well, that's $800 a year right now, right there. Are we going to make $800 in profit from distributing the film when we have no marketing budget? and the film itself has no, like, another factor of our film is it's very audience pleasing and relatable, but it has no super clear hook. You're not like, oh, it's a horror film, I like horror films, I'll take a chance on watching this horror film. Or like, oh,
Right.
it's a Christian faith film, I like Christian faith films, I'll take a chance on watching this Christian, right? There's no hook, there's no celebrity in it, there's no actor where you're like, oh, I love that actor, I'll take a chance, right? Because we are all unknowns. And so that makes the marketing of it would cost more to market it, except we don't have money to do that. And so yes, financially the film was a success creatively and not financially, but I don't regret it. I wouldn't take it back. It was a beautiful experience.
Oh, that is cool. But I think it's the reality, right? Because people outside of the industry go, "Oh yeah, all you have to do is make a really good film,"
Right.
which resonates with people. I mean, and I'm probably not your demographic, your core demographic, because it's a film about female friendship, lifelong female friendship, and the things that bond us together. And I mean, there's a lot of underlying themes as well. There's the siblings, and yeah. So, but I don't think when you think about your, it's like 51-year-old white male from Canada is going to really love this female friendship film. Probably I'm not in your demographic, I would imagine, right?
Right. Like if I sat there and you're like, who's going to buy this film? You're not the demographic that I would
Yeah.
target. Yet at the same time, we seem to have made this thing that many different people from many different demographics are responding to. And I think the reason is that it's just authentic. And I think we
Yeah.
all are interested in watching authentic human experiences. And it doesn't matter if we're the demographic for that film or not.
Right.
And that's the kind of art I'm really, really excited to make.
Cool.
Um,
Yeah.
and thank you it feels so good that you would take the time to watch the film, and then that you loved the film, and then that you want to talk about the film. Like, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well,
That's
thanks
just
for
such an
making it,
honor.
because that's what you did, right? You had a story to share that resonated with a human, authentic experience. Even the your main characters is lack of willingness to spread the ashes is a
Mhm.
really powerful. It's subtle. I mean, it's a driving factor in this story, but and I mean, you open with that scene,
Mhm.
but it comes back again and again, and it talks. I mean, there's so many things going on. I just loved it. I'm really excited. Like, oh, you've got to watch this film. That's what I
Oh,
wanted to do with it. So I'm excited. I'm excited about that. So I guess are you still, so because you're doing audiobook, you still obviously are a producer and actor in your soul. It's just one of the many creative things that you do. Are you still doing multiple things, or is it mostly focused on voice talent right now?
I am doing multiple things. So I do want to make more films someday. I'm just in a place where I'm like open to the flow of what's meant to be when. Like
Right.
in this exact moment, like the way I got that film done is I was in a place where I was like, I don't care what it takes. I don't care how much I have to sacrifice. I don't care how much money I don't make. I want to make this film. And that's
Yeah.
a place I was in, and that was a beautiful place. That's not sustainable for me. I don't want to live that way every single day. So that's not how I'm going to make another film right now or at the second.
Right.
Maybe a day will come where I'm ready to do that again. Maybe or maybe I'll be in a position where I have money to make a film. Like it's often occurred to me, like, what if I you know, make enough money and invest well enough that when I'm 70 years old, I can easily afford to make my own indie films. And that's when I start making films again. Like, I don't know. But I definitely have more ideas, and I do imagine I will make more films someday. I'm also I'm working on a couple writing collaborations right now.
Ooh.
I have a dream of launching a publishing business and I'm going to
Oh.
start with one of the writing collaborations I'm working on. I also have a book that I want to write by myself that would be published by this publishing company. So I'm also a singer right now. I do that like for myself. Like it is for my soul, and I do it in my free time just for me. And I'm not looking to monetize it at this moment. Um, I also occasionally, yeah, that's the summary. I have some irons in the fire.
Oh, that's cool. I love that. I love that you're creative in so many different ways. That probably nourishes your soul, right?
Thank you. Yes. Well, I both love that and hate that about myself. Because like one, I love it because it means that I can be very flexible about where and how I'm going to do things, and how, and that means that like I can get creative about like um, how I'm going to proceed.
Right.
And it also is just like who I am. Like if I j- but I hate it because there is a part of me that longs. I'm like, God, I want to be really, really good at one thing. And so if I just did one thing, like if I just acted, which if I had to pick one craft, acting would be it. Like I said,
Right.
it's, if somehow I had to only do one thing, it would be acting. Um, like the idea that I could just do one thing and then pour all my time into that, and then I would become more and more and more masterful at that one thing, is very appealing to me, right? This idea of like, well, if I'm spreading myself thin, I'm not going to be the best at any of these things. But I also think that might be a false notion. I think it's possible that like all these different disciplines, it's like cross training in a way. And I also think like, okay, so the thing is, I care about what I'm acting on. I want to work on projects that are meaningful to me. And if I limited myself to just acting, it would be very, very, very difficult to put myself into a position where I got to do more and more projects that I love. But if I also produce and write, that's easier to finagle.
Wow. I love that. I love it. It's funny how it all ties back together. Sarah, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Please let my listeners know where they can find out more about you.
Yes, I recommend my website. So sarahbethgoer.com. That's Sarah with an H, Beth, Beth, Goer, Goer.com. If you go there, you can find out more about me, and you can also contact me through my contact form. And I did want to throw in there too that I had mentioned that YA is a favorite genre. I also am really excited about nonfiction. I really want to work with more nonfiction indie authors too.
Cool.
And
Awesome.
and like I said, I'm open to all genres, and I produce. So if you
Oh,
need
that's
me,
right.
reach out.
All the opportunities that people have. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with me today.
Oh, my great pleasure. Thank you.
Fantastic interview with Sarah. Quite loved chatting with her. I wanted to share a couple reflections of things that made me think about when I was listening back to that. So, and as always, there are many, many reflections, but here are just two of them. So, thinking about being in LA, the difficulty of getting an audition, and comparing that to hanging your shingle up on ACX as a voice actor, which is something kind of disrupts the entire ecosystem. And I kind of relay that to a couple things. I first relate it to the curation and gatekeeping in traditional publishing. You don't need to wait for somebody in New York to greenlight your project. So there's a parallel there for actors in terms of voice talent, etc. And, ACX, Findaway Voices, places like that are, allowing authors and voice talent the ability to collaborate in bold new ways, not waiting for one of 5 big New York publishers to greenlight a project. But the thing she talked about was the knocking on 200 doors and the conviction of that. And that reminds me so much of originally traditional publishing, where you would get an average of 13 rejections before you got an acceptance. It's only 13, not 200. But the fact that she knew she was just going to give it a good go, give it a full and hearty, patient, persistent approach. And that's really, really critical. It has always been critical in writing. And I worry, and the reason I responded by saying the way indie authors don't wait 200 rejections before they give up on something is I see it all too often. I see an author trying to publish their book wide, and after 3 days they go, "Oh, I lost sales, and my sales aren't anywhere that they need to be," not realizing it takes 9 months sometimes to build up an audience outside of Amazon. Yes, Amazon, the big ecosystem, but it's that lack of patience and that lack of persistence that really frustrates me, because I think about those 200 doors, and I think about those that persisting in the face of like rejection. I know it's not rejection, but when people aren't buying your stuff, that's kind of rejection. It feels the same way, the same day as a closed door. And that's why I wanted to comment on that persistence, that long-term thinking, and a lot of the thinking that I'm reminded from Erin Wright from A Wide for the Win. And Erin Wright obviously being the really cool person, the author who introduced me to Sarah. And I'm so glad for that. Now, the other thing I wanted to reflect on, because again, there's a parallel to the book and publishing industry, is, and Sarah was talking about the idea that the distribution, being able to set up her movie in such a way that she could actually make money from it, would actually cost more than she could earn on it. And that really annoys the hell out of me. And it's an issue. It needs to be disrupted, the way that publishing was disrupted. I mean, I loved her movie, 3 Roads. I absolutely loved it. I want tons of people to watch it. I want to purchase the ability for people to watch it. Because when I love a creative work, whether it's a book, a song, a movie, a piece of art, whatever. I mean, for example, one of my favorite musicians, Alicia Witt, who I've talked about a lot on this podcast, she just released a new single independently, Why Christmas, to tie in with a Hallmark movie that she's in, because she often does the soundtrack because she's multi-talented. And I immediately went to try to purchase it. You can't purchase music on Google Play anymore because they merged it with YouTube Music or whatever. But I purchased it on iTunes, and it syncs up to my Google account. So that's perfect. Because when an artist creates something, I want to purchase it. It's only $1.29 or whatever I paid for it, but I want to be able to purchase it. I want some money to go to them. And I know they're going to get a small sliver of that, but the same thing with 3 Roads. You see something, you love it, I want to purchase it. I want money to go to the creator because I want creators to keep doing those things. And so I honestly think that that's frustration, and it's very, very frustrating. But it's something that I think needs to be disrupted. Is we need more ways, the way that Kindle and Kobo and Nook and Google and Apple and all of those companies have allowed independent authors to produce stuff. The way places like Spotify, although artists do get a very, very, very small sliver, but the way that those online systems allow independent artists to put their work up, and we can say, yes, I would like to purchase it. Yeah, of course. I mean, Alicia Witt's song, for example, Why Christmas, is posted to YouTube as a video. You can just listen to it for free. Great. That's fantastic. But I'm of the mind that I would love to be able to pay creators. And so I guess it's a reflection and a frustration, but it's also a hopeful thought, because I know if there are creative, reflective people out there thinking about ways that they can leverage technology to allow creators to be able to be compensated for their work, that's a phenomenal thing. So that's it for my reflections for this episode. Before I go, I forgot that at the beginning of the episode, I forgot to welcome new patron Kevin Partner to the patrons of the Stark Reflections podcast. Kevin, thank you so much, and welcome to the small but powerful group of wonderful people who support this podcast through donations. It is basically a donation, and I do appreciate you guys giving that, of $1, $3, or $5 a month. And you can do that over at patreon.com/starkreflections. In return, you get my thanks, my praise, my virtual hugs. At the higher levels, you also get additional audio content, video content, and other things that I post, including reflections on other podcasts and other audio things that I do like to share for those who enjoy extra audio and extra reflections. Well, that's it for this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. You do not have to join the Patreon to show your support of the podcast. To show your support of the podcast, all I would love for you to do is share it with a friend that you think would find value in these reflections. If you have any of your own reflections on things that Sarah and I talked about, or even on the reflections that I had, love to see them over at starkreflections.ca, where you'll find the show notes for episode 159 and the previous 158 episodes. So until next week and episode 160, this is Mark Leslie Lefebvre wishing you great writing and good Stark Reflections.
Thank you for listening to the Stark Reflections podcast. You can find show notes for each episode at starkreflections.ca.
The music for this podcast, Laser Groove, was composed and produced by Kevin MacLeod. Check out more of Kevin's great music at incomptech.com.